Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association webinar, Building Sustainable Communities, the Ins and Outs of Project Development. I'm Kristen Holinsky, Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives here at CHRA, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, so thank you all for joining us. Before we begin, I'll give a brief overview of the webinar technology. I'll then introduce our agenda and our speakers for this afternoon's presentation. Today's webinar is in real time. You should now be able to see a title screen of today's presentation and be able to hear me via your computer speakers, headset, or through your telephone if you've chosen to dial in. You're currently all muted, and we do this to minimize background noise. However, if you wish to ask questions, which we highly encourage you to do, you may type your question into the dialog box on the webinar control panel at any time during the presentation. And we'll address as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. If at any point you're having problems with the technology, please call Mark Hughes at the CHRA office. His email is available in the text box on your screen, or he can be reached at 613-594-3007, extension 19, and you can also reach me through the Q&A dialog box. Moving on to the agenda for today, CHRA is really pleased to have with us Daniel Sava, Planner and Member, Sustainable Communities Partnership, Department of Environment and Local Government with the Government of New Brunswick, and Margaret Critchlow, Director, Canadian Senior Cohousing Society and founding member, Harbourside Cohousing in BC. So thank you both for being here with us today. Before we get started, I'll set out the background for today's webinar, in which we'll hear from the Sustainable Communities Partnership of the Government of New Brunswick and the Harbourside Cohousing Seniors Project in British Columbia, who are each making sustainable, affordable community integrative design work. The Sustainable Communities Partnership of New Brunswick has developed a truly integrated planning approach called Building Sustainable Communities with Design, or the SCD Approach. Several communities in New Brunswick have implemented the SCD Approach and have seen smart growth and new urbanism practices flourish within fiscally responsible budgets. Le Village en Haut-Ruisseau in Dieppe will be featured as a testament to what sustainable planning practices can look like in Canada. Harbourside Cohousing is also showing that building sustainable development is possible and has responded to the needs of an aging population in creating their senior cohousing project in Sook, BC. The project will showcase how it came to fruition through collaboration with future residents on a shared commitment to sustainability, energy efficiency, and collaboration with the project management team. I'm now very pleased to introduce to you our first speaker, Daniel Sava, who's a planner and member of Sustainable Communities Partnership, Department of Environment and Local Government with the Government of New Brunswick. He's a senior planner with the province and has a Master's of Urban Planning from McGill University and a Master of Business Administration from the University of New Brunswick. During his years of work in planning for sustainable communities, he coordinated the implementation of the first Sustainable Communities Design subdivision project in the province at Le Village en Haut-Ruisseau in Dieppe, which received national and international awards and recognitions. His work on the SCD Approach was recognized in 2014 with a Visionary Award from the Gulf of Maine Council on the Marine Environment. He's one of the main facilitators for the SCD Approach that helps communities and builders to generate greater revenues, lower operational costs of infrastructures and services, welcome immigration and higher investments in regions, and implement sustainable building practices. Monsieur Sava regularly produces articles and discussion documents on the SCD Approach and is the author of the SCD Online Seminar that's published on the Province of New Brunswick Government's website. So welcome, Daniel, and it's over to you.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I would like, to thank everybody that is joining us. I would say good afternoon if you're in the eastern part of Canada, and good morning if you're on the western part of Canada. We have quite a weather pattern here in the eastern part. We're going to have some fun at one point in time if I still have power by the end of the presentation because of icy storm here and power outage. That is going to be quite a miracle. Well, anyway, I'd like me to talk today about building sustainable communities with design approach. I call it a fully integrated planning approach. And I'm going to start by talking about the point of view here with all the municipalities in Canada. I'm going to say that all the municipalities in Canada may benefit in adopting the implementation, as we call the SCD approach, or Sustainable Community Design Approach. with all their developments when looking for building sustainable communities. And I'm going to start by telling you a story, a true story. In 2004, there's a builder by the name of Charles Poirier, and he wanted me to subdivide this property that is 12.5 hectares in Dieppe, New Brunswick. So what he did, he got in touch with the city of Dieppe in order, to understand a bit of the context and the conflict here. The city itself had a zoning policy in place through their zoning bylaw for his property that limited the density to 5 units for his 12.5 hectares. And as you can imagine, Charles, he knew that he could not have the appropriate revenues to pay for all the infrastructure and make a profit with the development of the land. So he requested to the city of Dieppe a rezoning for his property. And what is the proposed resolution and complications with that? Well, the city, of course, said, okay, we're going to listen to your rezoning, and we're going to accept a rezoning here, but with the following conditions. First of all, you have to protect the area surrounding Fox Creek, which crosses his property, and you have to have at least 20% of all housing units to be considered affordable housing, as defined by the city. That means $100,000 per unit. And also implement all the relevant sustainable development practices or principles as presented under the SCD concept, which is the Sustainable Community Design concept, and accept also the coordination done by the province. It's where I was the coordinator of that project, and take the training that we gave them with the concept itself. On the other hand, you can understand that Charles, well, of course, he wanted to make a profit with his development and was interested to implement the concept only if the infrastructures costs were reasonable and the coordination would not be a waste of time and money. So what is the actual resolution of the whole thing? Well, the city and Charles were able to meet all their own objectives. Presently, Charles is building 217 units on 24% of the property. That means 76% of the property is protected. And Charles is able also to get at least 40 million in house sales revenue compared to, I would say, 2.5 million if he would have followed the original allowance under the conventional subdivision building. And on the city side, they were able to get $620,000 per year in tax revenues compared to a mere $40,000 if it would have been with the conventional principles. Now, since the beginning of the construction, you bet that if you're going to have something like that, you're going to have organizations that are going to say, oh, there's something here that is quite different, and it has received multiple awards, international, national, and regional, because of the uniqueness of the approach and also the benefits that promote sustainability in communities. And here I would like for all the municipalities in Canada to understand they can experience similar results with increased taxation revenues and sales revenues for their builders and developers, while at the same time protect the natural environment and build affordable housing units when they apply the SCD approach with their developments. And you're going to ask me, well, what is that approach? What is building sustainable communities with design approach? Well, it's an approach that was developed by the Sustainable Communities Partnership. And you can see at the bottom of the slide here, of course, as partner, you have the Province of New Brunswick, we have Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, we have the Association of Municipal Administrators of New Brunswick, we have Université de Moncton with Groupe Littoral Lévis, and we have also UNB with the Urban and Community Studies Institute. And the approach takes its roots from the Sustainable Development Approach, which considered the triple bottom line. That means we're going to evaluate the economy, the social aspects, and the environmental aspects all together in order to build sustainable development. And it means also that it's a fully integrated planning approach. And we mean by that when you use the approach, you will be informed on the link between how the density of your development in your community and the revenues are linked, what we call the situational study. And we're going also to work with the regions in order for them to be able to position themselves at the world stage to attract immigration and investment. We call it finding your world niche. And also the builders and developers and the communities will be informed on how they can implement sustainable building practices when developing a property. We call it equipping the developers and communities. So practically what it means that the partnership introduces the approach through an information session. I'm going to come back to that in a moment, and which will lead to the production of a situational study in order to understand the link between the municipality's revenues and its policies on development densities, the positioning after that of a region to attract immigration investments at the world level, and the training of builders, developers, and other decision makers to understand the steps to create sustainable developments, which will create sustainable communities. Now, the first time when we meet communities, we have discussion with officials, and we ask them, okay, what makes you tick? What are of interest for you? What are your concerns? At the time of the introduction, we start from where people are, and we move on from that point to where they're going to be interested. And our initial discussion basically it's like getting our foot in the door, and we would like me to move forward after that with the finances and also understanding how they can implement more sustainability in their community. And here you have an example of some of the questions we're asking them. Is it walkability that they would like to bring there, or is it conservation of nature, or is it fiscal impact that really bothers them and they would like to know a bit more how they can deal with that? What is their value of their houses really? And we have these type of discussions with them at the information session. When we present this information session is going to lead to that situational study. And with the situational studies, we're going to have the results here. And it is usually at that time that the municipality is going to realize that there are some misunderstanding regarding the development pattern that they are fostering in their municipality and their impacts on the municipality's finances. In general, there is a big misunderstanding regarding, first of all, the density. And here is, I'm trying to show it that way. We have one community here in New Brunswick, in their books and their zoning bylaw, they are requesting at least 5.8 houses per acre lot to develop. But we call it a net density. And when we talk to them about what is your real gross density, they were surprised to hear that in reality what they are experiencing is 0.66 unit per acre. Because think about that, when you build a house, you don't build just a house on a lot. You build a house on a lot plus the infrastructure that goes there, the roads, the services, the activities that are going to be there. And the real gross density will, as you can imagine, will have an effect on the cost and also on the revenues of the municipality. And this is the reason why we're telling to almost all the municipalities, please, please, please don't have only 10% of protection on any lot you're going to develop. We're pushing for 75% on any lot to be protected. And by pushing 75% on any protection, it's going to concentrate the development on the remainder of the property. By concentrating the development in a more compact fashion on a smaller area to develop, that will obviously have an effect on the cost of the infrastructure and also the services. And think about, for example, a 100-meter sewage pipe. If you have only one family that live around that 100-meter versus 10 families that live around that 100-meter, well, common sense tells you 10 families to pay for the capital cost plus the operational cost of having that sewage pipe is going to show in mathematics and how much it's going to cost and how much revenues also you're going to receive. So what we're seeing here, the cost for infrastructure are proportionate to the area to build, and the cost per capita will reflect also this type of logic. In addition, the revenues and the operation costs would also follow the same logic. We say that the revenues and costs are proportionate to the real gross density promoted in the municipality. Now, it's one thing to have the situational study being done, and we're helping at that point a municipality to figure out, okay, how they will amend their current density policies to reflect healthier revenues and more sustainable practices. But most communities in New Brunswick, especially the small rural communities in New Brunswick, are telling the partnership, but you know what? I mean, we're managing the population and low investment. And all the time, I mean, we have to talk to these people and we have to say, I hope, I mean, you're not an expert manager, because if you're an expert manager, it means that eventually you're going to disappear yourself. So basically what we're telling people, yeah, we're going to counteract depopulation. You're facing right now depopulation. We're going to address that, and we're going to welcome higher investments. When we ask people what they can do, they know what they have to do. My goodness, man, it's pretty easy. I mean, for them, they're saying, okay, we want to achieve higher revenues. We want to decrease the capital and operational costs of infrastructure and services. We want to attract newcomers, knowledge workers, retirees that have money. We want to bring jobs. We want to innovate. They understand that. But how is it that it doesn't work? How is it that it's not really implemented in communities? And here we notice one thing. If we are going to have a brainstorming session in order to help a region to understand their world niche, to position themselves at the world stage to attract immigration and investment in their communities, that can make a difference. Through the brainstorming session with the region, we are able to help them to understand who, how, what they want to attract in their community, and provide the initial information that will help organizations to contact the immigrants and investors with a kind of sales pitch that will target the right audience in countries like China, India, or other countries in the globe. Okay. Now, the final discussion, we call it final, but it could be sometimes the first discussion we have with some communities. The final discussion with the communities relate to usually how they can build in a more sustainable manner. We call it equipping the builders and the community. In a conventional development pattern, a developer or builder will approach a municipality and inquire about the number of houses or units they can build on their property they wish to develop. For the sake of this presentation today, we'll say that the municipality allows from their zoning provisions that 75 houses could be built on 30-acre property. Obviously, the municipality or the planning commission will also inform the builder, the developer of the delineation of the environmental constraints on the property, such as the floodplains, the wetlands, sinkholes, or areas that are inappropriate for building. And I'm going to say, that our builder or developer are very conscientious and will only parcel out what is outside the environmental constraint. What you will see at your left is an illustration of how it could look. How is it that people in community can get ticked off when they see subdivision like that? And here we hear from the people in communities, and they're telling you, well, you didn't take in consideration what is important for us. That could be from a cultural, from a historical, or biological point of view. And basically, it could be as simple as, I don't know, I mean, wildflowers that the kids are picking from that property for their mummies, and that is important for the community, and they would like us to protect it when we're going to think about subdividing a property. So if you take everything that the community is telling you, plus the environmental constraints, you add the two together and you call it a conservation area, well, you take the same type of houses, you didn't change anything about the type of houses, your 75 houses, you give another design, which is what you see at your right on the slide here, and you're going to have quite a different way of seeing your subdivision. You're going to have here all the benefits that you're looking for. It could be economical, environmental, and social. Basically, call it, I mean, a residential subdivision around a golf course, but you replace the golf course by a natural environment, and that is what we're talking about. And this is such an interesting way of approaching it that there's a document that came from the American Planning Association about a month ago, and they were telling us that we should use the SCD concept. They call it in the States the conservation subdivision, but it's the same thing. To deal with design, for example, for subdivision around flood areas and also to respond to climate change, they said that that was the best tool you can use for subdividing a property in these areas. Now, tomorrow morning, if I come to any community and I say, okay, we should use conservation subdivision, or how we call it here in New Brunswick, sustainable community design, you're going to tell me, coming from Canada, well, you know, we're Canadians, we're different, and something that comes from the state doesn't mean that it's going to work here. So in order to remove any misunderstanding, what we did here, we applied that type of concept to our Canadian context with that project in New Brunswick at Le Village en Haut du Ruisseau in Dieppe. And the results are quite impressive, I would say. 76% of that 30-acre property is protected, which means that the development will occur only on 24% of the property itself. That means 7.5 acres. And because we protect so much of the natural environment, it means that we'll be able to meet all at the same time the following benefits. And I'm going to name only a few here. For example, I mean, the conifers on the northern part of the property are protected, are protecting the subdivision itself, and they act as a natural barrier against the high winds in the winter months, which means that the residences can attain a higher energy efficiency. Most of the streets are east-west orientation, which translate in southern orientation for the main portion of the residences. Again, higher energy efficiency. The natural areas also provide protection during the summer months, so we're reducing overheating, and of course, I mean, it's a protection against the high winds in the winter. And the density, as I mentioned previously, right at the beginning of this presentation with the examples, instead of having only 5 units with the conventional subdivision, now we're talking about 217 units. So it's not really the density. The density now has increased to 7 units per acre, but it's more compact. And because it's more compact, well, you can do more. You can have the inclusion of a bike and trail system. You have Kodiak Transit that has said, okay, we're going to have a bus stop so you don't have to fight with Kodiak Transit in order to have a bus stop in the area. And also, it allows other modes of transportation than only cars. And it's becoming more like many more benefits that you're going to see. And I don't have time with this presentation to talk too much about all the other benefits, but if you're interested, just get in touch with me, and I'm going to have a discussion with you of how it was done over there. Such implementation, as I mentioned previously, got recognition, international, national, and regional. We got the Gulf of Maine Council, we got the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, we got the Clean 50 Tough 15 project in 2015 for that subdivision. We got l'Ordre des urbanistes that called it Développement endogène, and we have regionally also they were recognized as a sustainable subdivision. Now, it's one thing, to go with an approach and to say, okay, we have a kind of framework here, it seems to work, but if we are not meeting the community's objectives, well, we're missing the mark. We're not going anywhere. And here, I'm having one of the objectives that practically all the communities in Canada are looking for, especially when we're dealing with a population that is aging. And here in New Brunswick, it's aging even more in terms of average than what we can see in other provinces. And it's what was mentioned by the government, ensuring people can live out their years in their own homes. By having a framework or the approach itself, the SCD approach that is going to help you facilitate, for example, senior co-housing, that is going to help you to understand how it fits with the framework, you can reach all your objectives that you're looking for. You can have more affordable housing for the health system, for example, because they're looking at solutions right now. Hospitals are not going to be the way for seniors to finish their days. It's not the solution from where people would like to go. And most seniors, would like me to define where they would like to go. And I'm going to let Margaret talk more about that. But here, think about that. The framework itself is helping you to target and to bring with that any type of concepts, sustainable concepts that you would like to bring all together that are going to work. It can work, and I'm not saying that it's impossible, for example, that senior co-housing can be implemented without the approach, because Margaret is going to talk about that. But if you want to have it more systematically done in communities, you have to start where the communities are, and we have to facilitate great concepts like senior co-housing. Leaving you with some information here, contact information. Feel free to get in touch with me. It's going to be a pleasure for me to talk to you and see also what type of projects you have in mind. And on that, I'm going to leave you now, and I'm going to transfer the presentation to Margaret.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. Actually, before you leave us, we had one question for you that maybe you can just clarify. Someone was interested in the name of the developer, Charles, that you mentioned at the very beginning of your presentation. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. His name is Charles Poirier, and it's with TriDev Development.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much.
And if they want to have more information, feel free to get in touch with me. I have a ton of information. I have 700 pages of sustainable practices information, how to build these type of subdivisions.
And Daniel isn't kidding on that, because he gave me a binder with the full 700 pages of information on that. So he definitely has lots to share. So right now I'm going to introduce to you Margaret Critchlow, and we're going to flip to her screen. So we're just going to take a moment to do that. And we will move on to our next presentation. So, as I said, I'm going to introduce to you Margaret Critchlow, who's the Director, Canadian Senior Cohousing Society, and founding member of Harbourside Cohousing. Margaret holds a PhD and was a professor of social anthropology at York University in Toronto for 25 years before moving to BC and taking early retirement in 2010. She's the past president of the Canadian Anthropology Society. But upon retiring to Sook, BC, Margaret helped create Harbourside Cohousing, the first senior cohousing community in the province, which was completed in January 2016. She's a founding director of the nonprofit Canadian Senior Cohousing Society, or CSC. And through CSC, she's researching ways to increase affordability of cohousing and to adapt cohousing principles to benefit more aging Canadians. And a few months ago, with funding from the BC Real Estate Foundation, she co-authored a set of how-to guides for innovations in seniors housing, and these are available as free downloads from the CSC website. The success of Harbourside Cohousing and her joy of living there with her husband John have inspired Margaret to embark on a new career 6 years after retirement. She's working with the Cohousing Development Consulting to support community building in new BC cohousing communities and believes that this work is the most interesting and significant anthropology she's done so far. So welcome, Margaret, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kristen. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. There we go. Oops, I want to do that. Harbourside was initiated, as Kristen suggested, by Canadian Senior Cohousing Society, which is a registered nonprofit society. And our mandate is to reframe aging and affordability using cohousing principles. We're committed to working with baby boomers to reframe how our society approaches aging and find ways to flourish instead of languish as we get older. This is a picture of Harbourside Cohousing members at move-in, which was just about a year ago today, really. We're the first senior cohousing in British Columbia, only the second in Canada. And this very complex development was created entirely through the hard work of these people with the support of professionals. Started as a dream in 2011 when a friend and I were putting our mothers in care homes and had a conversation about we've got to find something better and more affordable for ourselves. At first in 2011 there were just 3 of us, then 8 by the time we purchased the property, and word spread. It was almost entirely word of mouth. Our advertising budget was almost nothing. The CBC radio documentary shown or aired in November of 2015 created a huge amount of interest in our community, but we did no other outreach beyond that. And by the time of construction start in September 2014, all 31 units had purchasers who were eager to move in. So I want to share with you how we did that, but first give you some background on cohousing itself. Cohousing strives to create an environment where neighbors know and support each other. It encourages a sense of community while maintaining the option for privacy. Private dwellings are compact and energy efficient. They're complete. They all have kitchens. And the compact size and energy efficiency keeps costs down for the members, but everyone benefits from the common amenities such as a large common house, an exercise room, an art room that might be unaffordable individually. Harbourside is the first, as I said, the first senior-focused cohousing community in BC. The community is not age-restricted. Our ages actually range from their mid-40s to mid-80s, and we include 3 generations. Our approach to aging focuses on getting out of denial and being prepared, staying active, and giving and receiving neighborly mutual support when needed. We have a flexible care suite in our common house for visiting families, for respite care, home care, or a paid caregiver. Senior cohousing offers a continuum of care model that integrates social connections right into accessible and affordable housing solutions. This slide contains all the principles of cohousing and what senior cohousing adds. So as you can see, the emphasis is on participatory process. We all worked very hard on creating this community. At the end of the day, it's a very simple title. In BC, we call it strata title. You may call it condominium title in the rest of the country. We have extensive common facilities, including guest rooms, and a design that both facilitates community connection and privacy. We are, even after, well, during development and after move-in, we're resident managed with consensus orientation, so we make our decisions almost entirely by consensus with a voting backup. And we focus on sustainability as both in environmental, social, economic, and cultural senses. We have a care suite. We're the other co-housing that's senior focused doesn't have that, but we have that opportunity. We offer something called co-care, which we define as neighborly mutual assistance. And the common facilities give us options for centralized home care. And in fact, just the concentration of a number of seniors in one location helps to create efficiencies. We required a weekend course called Aging Well in Community, or Dare to Age Well in Community, for all of our members, which we believe helped to create this culture of co-housing. The kinds of people who live in co-housing, and here I'm including multi-generational communities that include families with young children, come from all sorts of backgrounds and incomes and family types. They all want to have something to say about their housing and control over it, and they all believe that being connected with their neighbors will improve their quality of life. It's not below market housing, and everyone has to have the financial ability to purchase a home in the community. Generally, people in co-housing value privacy as much as they value connection with their neighbors. That was very important to us at Harbourside. And they place an importance on green homes or energy efficient homes and lots of shared community space. This is the slide that really contains everything anyone needs to know about how these projects are financed. What happens is a development company is created when people gather to purchase a property for co-housing, and each member of that company becomes a director and shareholder. It's one share per household, not per person, and the shareholders contribute what we call required shareholder loans during development. Those are converted toward the purchase price. They become a down payment on the purchase price of the home at completion. And shareholders are also invited, it's very optional, to invest additional money toward the purchase of their home if they wish to do that. And in that way, at least 25% of the project equity is raised from the members, and the balance comes from a construction loan. All the members participate in, or have the opportunity to participate in, planning the community. This is a slide from one of our design workshops. We had 6 design workshops with the architect during the planning process, and felt that we had a lot of input into the design so that it suited the members of our community, the ones who were planning to move in. And the support for ordinary people like ourselves to do that comes from working with an architect and project manager. Let's go back to Harbourside's story then. By 2012, we had 8 households who had committed to purchase this resort shown in the lower left of the slide called Souk Ocean Resort, and commit to create a senior-oriented co-housing community in this little town of Souk. The groundbreaking is shown in the upper left slide, and that was in September 2014. By that time, all 31 units had purchasers who'd spoken for them and committed to them. The site includes a beautiful wharf. It's a waterfront, south-facing site. Unlike New Brunswick, we have no snow today and have barely had, I think we had about a half an inch so far this winter. So it's been a very attractive site, not only to people from this area, but to people from Alberta and Saskatchewan. The grassroots group that formed to create Harbourside then partnered with professionals. And I emphasize that because failure to partner with professionals is a major reason that co-housing groups do not succeed. And it's hard to get statistics on this, but some statistics suggest that 90% of the co-housing groups that attempt to form don't get to the move-in stage. So the owner of this little resort wanted to sell to the group and then become a member of the community, and he's done that. And it was very helpful to have a friendly owner, and in fact there's a second group forming in Souk that has followed the same pattern. So having a friendly owner meant that he waited until we had done full feasibility studies and achieved rezoning before we actually paid for the property, and he then took back financing to carry us through to construction start. These are the professionals with whom we worked, the central ones. Renee Matthew of Burnaby, BC's Co-Housing Development Consulting, or CDC, is on the right, and Peter Troyhut of Mobius Architecture is on the left. And they have worked together to create a number of co-housing communities in BC and also the one in Saskatchewan. So co-housing absolutely requires committed founding members, people who are burning souls to create co-housing, but it also requires professionals to bring the project to completion on time and on budget. And these were the two who helped us then to line up. We must have had about 20 other professionals, surveyors, and different kinds of engineers and so on, all of whom played important roles in creating our community. We selected this site, which is in the central core of Souk. You see Horn Road on the left, which is a street 2 blocks from the center of town, and the Souk Harbor on the right. And the north-south arrow is oriented toward the upper left of the slide. And we selected this site because it fit the official community plan and had the town planner's support. That was very difficult to get the right site that they would support, and we looked at 6 sites before we settled on this one. Once we had their support, it became easy. So working with the official community plan and the local planners to achieve the kind of community support that you need to make the project happen is key. We rezoned from R1 residential to a comprehensive development zone that allowed us to construct 7 buildings. This was fairly easy for us once we had their support, but having the blanket zoning in place, as Daniel describes, would have been helpful. Harbourside's site is quite steep, posing challenges and opportunities for construction. The design worked with the slope, and the slope allowed us to maximize views, so each unit in each of these buildings has a view of the harbor. But it created challenges for construction. We had ended up building a lot of retaining walls that cost us a lot of money, but it allowed us to achieve the density that we needed to maintain affordability and to maintain the views that we wanted. There are 31 units in 7 buildings, plus the existing resort, which is a yellow building in the upper left of the site plan. And that was converted to a common house with guest rooms, a care suite, entertainment space, and so on. There are 3 building forms. There are duplexes, buildings 1, 2, and 3. No, sorry, buildings 3, 4, and 5. And there are 4plexes, buildings 1, 2, and 6. And then a 3-story apartment building with 13 units. There are 5 floor plans, and they're distributed amongst those units, not clustered in any particular area. And they range in size from 628 square feet to 960 square feet. A 2-bedroom and den is the largest. They're all on one level, wheelchair accessible within the units, although some have stairs to access the units. That would be the 4plexes at the bottom have stairs to access the upper units. Co-housing is built at cost, but because members generally want higher quality construction and energy-saving features, the price of the home is generally the same as in conventional development. But co-housing contributes to the affordable housing continuum through the through the opportunity to share resources, which also supports people to live in smaller spaces without compromising their quality of life. A Victoria construction company called Campbell built our co-housing community with homes that meet Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation standards for affordability. That is, and there are three of those. One, they are modest in size, design, and amenities. Second, it's a non-profit development. So there was no developer's profit in this, and we members put in enough equity to get to the point of construction start, and in fact well beyond that, and did not take any profit for ourselves. And third, the project has a low cost of living, supports a low cost of living. We achieved Built Green Canada Gold standard, so our energy costs are very low. We're an all-electric, hydroelectric community. And volunteer labor from the people who live here also helps to keep the operating costs low. Our 2016 condo fees were $250 a month. They're increasing to $319 for 2017, for a number of reasons that after the first year we have some additional costs. As a social and as a physical design for independent living, this is far more affordable than the institutional models, like independent living communities, and we believe it's a whole lot more fun. The slide at the bottom shows the interior of one of our 800 square foot units, and it has 2 bedrooms. The bedrooms are on the left. And all of the units have an 8-foot wide deck. Everybody gets a choice of whether they want a deck divider or not. And you can see in the duplex in the upper slide, they've chosen just to have a bench there. The required course on aging well in community helped people decide if co-housing in general and Harbourside in particular was right for them. It built our culture and it built our community, and we really enjoyed facilitating it, and the participants had a lot of fun. I now offer a new course called Is Co-Housing for You? It's also a weekend, and it's required for membership in the new co-housing groups in our area. There are 2 of those, because it allows you to find out at low risk whether this is going to be something you think is working well for you. The required course emphasized the importance of voluntary mutual support as an alternative to expensive, impersonal, institutional care. The values underlying co-care are to develop an ability to ask for what you need. This is the hardest part. To give only what you are willing, and to receive assistance with grace. That's also hard. I had 2 hip replacement surgeries this year, one in April, one in October. My husband and I received, he's not much of a cook, received 6 days of lunches and dinners from our neighbors each time, beginning the day I came home from the hospital. And compare the cost of living at Harbourside and the joyful offerings of food and things like that at just $250 a month strata fees with the monthly fees in many independent living facilities. And as you might guess from that slide, the food is an awful lot better at Harbourside than we hear it is in the institutional living facilities. After living at Harbourside for a year, almost to the day, it was yesterday, I believe we are achieving our mission. And 2 new co-housing communities are following in our footsteps. One is just a few hundred meters away on the waterfront in Souk, called West Wind Harbour Cohousing, and the other is they're looking for an urban site in Sydney, Brentwood Bay, or Saanich on the Saanich Peninsula, just outside Victoria, and it's called Saanich Peninsula Cohousing. Harbourside Cohousing is at the end of our rainbow, there on the right of the screen, and we hope to see more great senior co-housing projects that will make you say, wow. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Margaret. I now can't decide if I'm moving to BC or New Brunswick. What great projects that you guys are sharing in terms of how you're bringing together community and sustainability and affordability. So to all of you on the line, we do have time for questions for both Daniel and Margaret. We have about 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So encourage you to type them into the dialogue box, and I can share them with our presenters. If you want to let me know if your question questions directed to either Daniel or Margaret, or if you have a general question for both of them, that's great. So don't be shy. Type in your questions and we'll ask away. I did receive a question during the presentation asking if we'd be sharing the slides, and the answer is yes. If you check back on the CHRA website under our programs, we have a webinar tab, and within 48 hours we will have the presentations and a recording of this session up on the CHRA website, so you can review what took place here today. So I'm going to unmute your line, Daniel, so you can jump in and speak as well. So we have a couple questions rolling in. And one here that is asking Margaret, someone's interested in the co-housing project. Do you have a detailed report on the project that goes more into depth on how you did the planning, financing processes that you are able to share with those who are interested?
Thanks. That's a great question. And we have the guides that Kristen referred to in the introduction, supported by the BC Real Estate Foundation and the Community Social Planning Council. Those are available as a free ebook download from Canadian Senior CanadianSeniorCohousing.com. It's under resources there. And there are 3 separate publications there. One of them includes a detailed case study of Harbourside, so that may be helpful to you. There's also some information under the communities on that same website, Canadian Senior Cohousing, and Harbourside.ca also has a website.
Great, thank you for that, Margaret. We also, for Margaret, there was more interest if you could explain what the costs were up front for the project for those who are buying into it.
Right. So typically, as you begin a project, you keep track of the expenses that the members are incurring. And these can be, like, for example, having a Getting Your Community Built workshop, which is one thing that CDC, or Canadian or Co-Housing Development Consulting, offers. Those costs can all become a down payment on the cost of your home at the completion of the project, if the project completes, right? So those costs are accumulated. And then when members commit to purchase a property, usually the minimum or the required shareholder loan is set at whatever is appropriate to the market. For Harbourside, it was $20,000. For new co-housing in Vancouver, it's more likely to be $50,000. And that's all that the members have to commit until they get ready to start construction. And then they top up those loans to 10% of the cost of their home. So let's say you put in a $20,000 required shareholder loan, as we did for Harbourside in January 2013, and then by September 2014, you top it up to, say, $35,000 if your home is going to cost $350,000. And that happens in that way because we don't know until quite far along in the project what the actual cost of the home is going to be. And so having that much at construction start is what is required in order to get additional funding.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. We have a question for Daniel as well. In terms of your experience using the SCD approach in New Brunswick, you mentioned a lot of opportunities to use that building approach, whether it's for seniors or counteracting depopulation, investment, or supporting newcomers. In your experience with the builds that you've done so far, is there one or the other that of these approaches that have been most beneficial in terms of supporting either seniors or newcomers? Do you find it works differently when there's different targets in terms of the outcomes?
Well, it's interesting to receive a question like that because when we started, for example, the project at Le Village en Haut-Zoïseau, that was supposed to be our pilot project for the province, we didn't have in mind to target seniors, but the builder himself targeted single family and targeted seniors to a certain extent by offering the type of housing where in the end they got a bunch of people that were older in age than what you see in a subdivision with kids around. So it became, to a certain extent, a kind of senior subdivision, but it's not to the same extent, for example, than what Margaret has just mentioned. What we would like to have is more of what Margaret is talking about, but facilitating at the local level, because Margaret mentioned how it could be tricky with municipalities when it's time to find the right place where everybody from the municipality is going to support you, when you're going to have also all your professionals that are going to help you. And it's not true that you're going to know right from the beginning everything that you have to do. It could be quite complex. The idea of where you want to go is one thing, but how it's going to unravel can be a bit complicated. I'd like to hear, Margaret, what you have to say in that regard. Margaret?
There we go. Yes, it definitely can be quite complicated. So, and that's why we had the professionals with us. And having people familiar with the local area, we had a civil engineer who was absolutely priceless. He saved us $250,000 in negotiating with the local regional authority. So involving the right people, having experts such as Daniel's suggesting to look at a blanket approach to this is a really great idea. And in terms of the ages, we have the two new communities, co-housing communities that are starting here. One is like Harbourside, senior focused but not age restricted, and the other one is looking for really multi-generational. They want some young families and so on. They're both attracting people largely in their 50s and 60s. So it's an interesting phenomenon as the younger baby boomers start to look for where they want to settle in their retirement.
Yeah, you got that right. Yeah.
Got a question that I'm going to ask from both of you. We're starting with Daniel. Can you guys just reiterate again what the project timelines were from startup until the development approvals were obtained and you were able to break ground and then construct, just so we can compare both of your experiences. So, Daniel?
Okay. Well, you have to distinguish here between what is a pilot project and what is a regular project. A pilot project always takes more time than a regular project. Everything we have done, of course, took about a year and a half, 2 years in terms of planning, in terms of organizing how it's going to work, because there was a lot of unknown at one point. But if I would do something like that, I would say within 6 months you can have everything on board. It's just a question of, well, we know how it works now. We know who we should have on board, how it should work. So we have to distinguish between that. And also we have to look that sometimes you want me to have a full-fledged sustainable subdivision, or do you want to have some principles that are going to be added to the subdivision you have in mind? So you can have a hybrid that is going to require less thinking and less design in mind.
And Margaret?
I think that Daniel's absolutely correct in saying the prototypes take longer. So we had our first meeting in late fall of 2010 just to see who was interested, and got serious in 2011. We moved in January 2016, so that's 5 years really. The new groups, I believe, will be doing it in 3. One thing that slowed us down a lot was a belief that we might be able to do this without involving professionals, that the professionals were expensive and that we could do a lot of the work ourselves. So we spent really all of 2011 learning from Charles Durrett, who is the creator of cohousing in the U.S., along with Catherine McCammett. They've written all the books on senior cohousing, creating cohousing, and so on. We trained with him, and then we offered his study group 1 as a weekend course all through 2011, 2012, 2013. That was very valuable, but I wish that we had gone ahead in connecting with cohousing development consulting earlier, because it would have saved us at least a year. By September 2012, we purchased our property subject to feasibility. We removed the feasibility condition in January 2013. That's when we had 8 committed shareholder members, shareholder households. We started rezoning in April. We got the rezoning in 6 months, which was very quick for this town. And then did our development permit, which took another 6 months almost. And we were also doing the preliminary planning with the construction company and getting our financing. So we started construction in September 2014. It was a complex site, and it took until January 2016 to complete construction.
Great. Well, those are 2 good comparable timelines there, so people get a sense of that. And a little bit
nothing
related.
went wrong. I would just add, Kristen, that nothing went wrong. It just took time. And so if groups can realize early on that they would benefit from working with the professionals and getting serious about it. Some groups, I believe, really enjoy just having a potluck every 2 weeks. And that's fine, but that won't move the project forward.
Yeah, got to be committed. So related but different, Daniel, there's a question in New Brunswick. How flexible have you found the planning department in rezoning rural areas to increase density to create the SCD that would support cohousing? So density is a method for SCD in rural areas.
How open they are? I would say not open, okay? And here, until the time you have to demonstrate how much it costs them and how much they are losing in terms of revenues. Of course, I mean, they're going to promote 1 acre lot if it's not 2 acre lot and stuff like that, and sprawl is the norm and they love it, okay? Normally speaking, okay? So we have to demonstrate to a community that every time you're building, it has an effect also on providing services and also the infrastructure. You're going to take care of it, the operational costs, the capital costs. And if you have less people per area, well, of course, I mean, your revenues are going to be down. And it's amazing that it's an eye-opener to a lot of municipalities when you show them. For example, do you remember in the presentation I was showing them, they were telling me that the density was 5.8 houses per acre, and they were saying, oh, we have a right density. But in reality, what they're experiencing is 0.66 unit per acre. And you bet that it has a huge impact, because for each dollar of revenues that they were receiving, each dollar of cost that they were paying for whatever service, they were receiving something in the vicinity of 70 cents. I mean, common sense tells you it makes no sense. So we have to show them in terms of dollar figures how important density is and how we could build in a more sustainable way.
Well, thank you for that, Daniel. Margaret, we have a question for you that's a bit two-pronged here. One is, what happens when a person or couple needs to move elsewhere out of cohousing or passes away? And related to that, what have you found in terms of, you spoke a lot about home care and continuum of care and co-care, and have you actually been working with either private therapists or with the provincial health authority to bring people in to the co-housing unit to share resources and services?
Okay,
health-wise. Yeah.
So the, sorry, what's the first part again?
What happens when someone needs to move
needs
out?
to sell, right.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm thinking that during development, that's one question, because what happens is that the co-housing, if someone needs to leave, they actually leave their money in the project. And if they die, their heirs, if the community knows and welcomes their heirs, then that's fine. And if they don't, then the community, the other shareholders, buy back that share. Once we moved in, the project is strata titled or condominium title, and anyone can sell their unit as they would sell any other condominium. There's nothing complicated about it. That said, we do support people to resell their homes using the community's services. So they can use a realtor or they can just work with the community to have an open house. We have an interested list, I should say, of over 400 people who want to be notified when a home becomes available for rental or for purchase. We haven't had any resales until as of the present date. So everybody who moved in a year ago is still here. We know that we will have 2 resales in the near future. And so those will be promoted on our website and sent to everybody who has signed up. You can sign up by just clicking on under available homes on harbourside.ca to be notified about these 2 units. So that's pretty straightforward, and I have no experience to share on it yet, but I will do. The question of health care, also, we moved in pretty healthy. We've not needed anybody to come in and provide health care here. We have had a challenge. It's a small town, and we could really benefit from more doctors. So some people are having to go to Victoria or even retain their health care support in their home province. So this is very difficult, and we have the privilege of having 2 doctors in the community. One's a family doctor, the other specializes in gerontology, and they are helping us to navigate the system and to anticipate how we might bring in additional health care when we need it. So stay tuned. We are a work in progress.
Thanks for that. We'll take a couple more questions, though we have many questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. So I do encourage people to use the contact information of Daniel and Margaret if you have specific questions for them, or go to their websites and look up some of the documentation that they were speaking of that's available on the Government of New Brunswick site and also the Canadian Senior Cohousing Society site. Just a couple more questions, though, for Daniel. Can the Sustainable Communities Approach be applied in urban areas? As usually developers want to minimize conserved areas.
Yes, of course. The concept itself, conservation design for subdivision, was first of all presented in an urban area, and it was in order to protect as much as possible of the open space or the natural area. So it's quite possible to protect 40% of any property. Of course, I mean, if you are in a more rural areas, you can go, I would say, 70%, 75% without any much problem. It's just a question of helping people to understand that the problem is never a problem of density. It's a problem of design. And that has been the case for so many subdivisions. And if an urban area would like to implement the concept itself, yeah, we can do that. And we can even bring senior co-housing with protection of the natural area as much as possible, with everything that people have in mind. But we have to think otherwise than just the conventional way of dealing. And usually the conventional way of dealing is what is in the books. And they're looking at the zoning and they're saying, we cannot do it. And we're saying, no, I mean, put everything aside. We're going to define what we want. And after that, we're going to make sure that we're going to facilitate where we want to go.
Thanks. So we'll ask one more question to Margaret and then a question for both of you before we close. So Margaret, can you just talk a little bit more about how you organized for the financing of the construction loan in addition to what the 10% you got from the shareholder participants?
So in addition to the 10% from the shareholder participants, we invited people to invest additional loans in the project, for which they received a further discount on their home purchase, right? And those raised, we had about 30%, I think, by that time of the money we required. We went to a number of banks and credit unions, and in our experience in BC, the credit unions are more amenable to financing this kind of a project. And it's only some credit unions, in fact. And we found a lot of support from Van City Credit Union, which is a Vancouver-based credit union, who were happy to provide the construction financing. And then as people sold their homes in preparation for moving into Harbourside and in preparation for the completion of construction, they were able to put that money into the project as well. So in the end, and Van City was very accommodating about this. So in the end, we only drew down approximately half of our construction loan because we didn't need it, because the owners were putting their money in.
Thank you for that. And now just a question to close for both of you. Are you aware if either of these projects have caught the attention of the federal government in any way? And if so, how? And if not, why not? Daniel?
You mean the federal government? You mean the CMHC, for example? Or what are you talking about exactly?
Well, go with CMHC.
Okay. CMHC is aware with us, but it's CMHC regional for the Atlantic provinces. And there are people at CMHC that are aware of what we're trying to do here in New Brunswick. We have developed the framework for the province, but I'm convinced myself that the framework works anywhere in Canada. It's just a question of saying, okay, what is your regulation in place and how your enabling legislation works, and we're going to work with you in order to bring it to a certain extent. It's just a question of, do you want me to use another approach or not? So I would say that the federal government would know probably from the back door, not the front door. A lot of people from the federal government sometimes are not aware of what's going on in the region. So,
well, that's good for us to keep in mind. Margaret?
Yes, the Harbourside project and senior co-housing in general have attracted the attention of Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation in a number of ways. Harbourside is a case study on their website. I did a webinar for them a couple of years ago, I guess now, and Renee Matthew, who's the principal of Co-Housing Development Consulting, did one for them just a month or two ago in late 2016. The interesting thing is that although we're not below market housing, Canada Mortgage and Housing does regard us as an affordable housing strategy. And they invited me to give a presentation at the BC Nonprofit Housing Conference. When was that? Early this year, I guess. No, late last year. And it was in a session called Housing Projects That Make You Say, Wow. So there's an admiration, I think, for what we're doing. And part of it that arises from seeing that this is such an affordable alternative to institutional care or institutional retirement communities for seniors. And as the demographic bubble of the baby boomers approaches, having this as one of the tools in the toolkit for dealing with the baby boomers is something that I believe CMHC has at least recognized. It would be great if there were subsidies to encourage this, because it actually does save the taxpayers a huge amount of money. But that hasn't happened yet. So we are committed at Canadian Senior Co-Housing Society to try to raise that awareness. And if any of the people participating in the webinar have ideas for how to do that, I'd invite them to contact me through the seniorcohousing@gmail.com.
Can I say something, Kristen?
Yes, absolutely.
I know that with my contact information, I put only the gnb.ca email, but sometimes it's difficult, just to get the information, and if would like, to have another email address, they can get back to me directly at timberwolf57@live.ca, timberwolf with an E, 57@live.ca. I'm going to send you the information anyway, so just in case.
Perfect. And anyone too on the webinar who wants to get in touch with Margaret or Daniel is having trouble, you can get in touch with me, Kristen Holinsky, and my email information is on the CHRA website, and I can put you in touch with both Daniel and Margaret as well. Well, thank you very much to Daniel and to Margaret for your time and for your presentations, and thanks to our audience for participating and for sticking around with the Q&A period. I think there's a lot of interesting questions and conversation that I'm sure we'll keep moving forward after this webinar has finished. So thank you very much. Just before we leave, CHRA's winter webinar series is up and running. Our next webinar is February 15th, where we'll hear from the Appraisal Institute of Canada on understanding the fundamentals of real estate valuation in a social housing environment. And on March 21st, we'll be joined by the City of Toronto to discuss accelerating affordable rental housing development through their Open Door Affordable Housing Program. So you can check out the webinars that are upcoming on CHRA's website at chra-achru.ca/programs for more information. So thank you very much to everybody. And again, the presentations will be made available in the next few days, so check back soon. Take care and bye for now.